Welcome, everybody. This is quite an adventure. I I've always loved the sculpture that I've seen of Noguchi, and I was familiar with some of the furniture that he did and some other design work that he'd done, but I had no idea the breadth and depth and vision of this man. He is a well. Let me put it this way. I don't use the word visionary very often, but the guy was a visionary. It's remarkable the breadth of his interests and you know the sculptures, the gardens, the furniture, lighting design, ceramics, architecture, set designs. It's just really mind-boggling the directions that he went in his lifetime. Um, so, as you can see on the right an image of the museum itself. It was a factory building that he took over. It was like basically across the street from his studio, so he bought this building. He looked into donating his work to the Whitney, to the Museum of Modern Art, to the Metropolitan, to a number of big museums. But he knew that none of them would be putting the work up as a body of work. And he really wanted to see that happen. So not only is there a museum here in Queens, in Long Island City, but there is also another one in Japan, and I believe there are a couple of other annexes around the world. All right, so it's really a transformative vision that this guy had, bringing together all these things. So what we're going to do is move right into a couple of the galleries inside the museum and just give you an overview of what's there and what's available. You can see outside these big windows, there's a garden outside in a courtyard behind the factory building that houses the museum. And here we have a couple of the light sculptures that he created. It's just really beautiful, contemplative work. There's very diverse materials, metal, aluminum, a lot of very simple industrial material. He was not into welding at all. He didn't do a heck of a lot of welding. Most of his pieces are made out of aluminum, that are metal pieces, painted, and the bendable and all that. So he worked a lot with that kind of material. He liked the industrial materials, but he also liked stone and clay and the earthy things. So it was a combination of modernity and archaic materials, a union between the ancient and the modern that he was after in his work. Very interesting guy. A Zen kind of thing. He studied Zen and all that. and yet there was always this conflict, you know, the East and West, that whole thing. I'll go into more of that when I talk about his biography a bit. So let's move on. Okay. Alexander Graham Bell was a true artist. This is a quote directly from the man. You know, the invention, innovation are essential in his work. The archaic and modern meet. It's a hybrid of science and art, you know, using diamond blades and hammers and chisels. It's substantial, and yet it's about this void. It's about this space. You know, he did a lot of business about outer space. So this thing was kind of thinking of the eclipse as an image that kind of went with this. If you guys have any questions that come up, please type them into the chat section and Joan will feed me your questions. I love to get questions. It always stimulates me because I know a heck of a lot more about this guy than I can ever get to. Okay, so now we're going to deal with the biography stuff. He was born in 1904. His mother, Leone, was a writer and very independent woman of that time. His father was a poet, writer, art critic, and really introduced haiku to the West. They met because he needed help translating from Japanese to English. He was trying to write books and wasn't really as fluent in English as he needed to be. So she met him through that. She helped him translate and helped him to write in English. They had an affair. It went on for a year or so. And, you know, we're talking about, you know, 1903, 04 in there. And she became pregnant. As soon as he found out she was pregnant, he went back to Japan. So there was an abandonment thing going on back then, and that stayed in and out of Noguchi's life. So Isamu was born in Los Angeles in 1904. Leone took him to Japan because she wanted him to know his father. And that didn't go so well. By that time, Leone had another wife, had children on the way. So he really kind of rejected Isamu. And they stayed there. Now she lived. She actually taught English to Japanese, and this is a remarkable woman. I mean, she raised Isamu and actually had a daughter out of wedlock also, who grew up to be a wonderful dancer, actually a Martha Graham dancer. At 14 years old, Isamu was sent to a school in where the heck was it? Indiana, an experimental school that was basically a hands-on school. You learn by doing. She found it in an advertisement in Scientific American. So this is the kind of woman that she was. She looked at this and said, "This is a place I want my son to be." So she sent him at 14 years old by himself across the ocean. There's an ocean voyage to a place that he had never been. Um, Again, he wasn't really accepted in Japan because he was half American, half Japanese. In Indiana, didn't go so well either. I mean, half Japanese and half American. Um, but he was a very bright student, and when he graduated from school, went on to college, pre-med actually. um, I can't remember where it was. It might have been Columbia. I can't remember that part right now. Not that important, but pre-med. um, Leone moved back to New York City at that point, and Isamu moved back in with her. They were not getting along real well. He never really forgave her for sending him away. Um, but for some reason, with all the friction that was there, he listened to her when she said, you don't belong in pre-med. You should go to art school. And he listened to her and went to art school and was very talented. Immediately took to it. As you can see on the left, he was a very good academic sculptor. Within months, he had accomplished a great deal of understanding. He could do this right away. He took it was like a duck to water. So he mastered this academic sculpture, but he was looking around him. Basically in 1924, he was looking at the contemporary art scene at that time. Gallery 291 was still in existence. Actually, Stieglitz may have moved on. Stieglitz was a photographer and art dealer who was married to Georgia O'Keeffe, and actually showed all the moderns, John Marin, Marsden Hartley, many of the big names of early modernism in America showed with him. So Noguchi would have seen this. And actually in 1926, there was a Constantine Brancusi show in New York City. And he saw that show and it was just like, okay, I'm done with this academic stuff. This doesn't make sense to me. I'm the poster boy for the old school and I ain't going there. So what happened was he applied for a Guggenheim Fellowship and got it and went to Paris. And on the right, you see two of Brancusi's pieces. And on the left are two pieces that actually, the one all the way to the left is a drawing that I believe he did in Paris, but I'm not 100% certain about that he didn't do any sculpture while he was in Paris. He talked Brancusi into allowing him to be his assistant, and Brancusi never did that. So there's something about the focus and force of character that was coming through. So he spent 7 months as an assistant in Brancusi's studio, drinking in what his work was about. And when he came back to America, this globular was one of the pieces that he did. And again, the two pieces on the right are Brancusi. They're really, these essential forms, essential shapes, combinations of materials, organic shapes, abstracted. And on the right, we have one of Noguchi's pieces from that time. And it was 1929. He came back in the middle of the you know, the Depression. So he took on a few commissions, and he did these heads and did very well with them. He you know, basically was able to sell enough of them to be able to afford to go back to Japan. And Uncle Tanaga is actually a piece that he did when he was in Japan. Is his uncle um, gave him a house and really befriended him. Um, it's interesting. My father's brother had been adopted to his wife's family, so it's kind of like they were kindred spirits in a certain way, sort of not quite legitimate relatives. Uh, so again, you see the Brancusi head all the way on the left, and how that simplification, essential form, that business of the organic, you know, the egg, the head, the simplification of natural forms was part of what Noguchi synthesized from Brancusi. And these two heads are basically, there was a maid that he had when he was in Tokyo, and these are head pieces that he did of her. We don't know what his relationship was with her. Maybe there was more going on there than we know about. He got around. Okay, and so this is a Cycladic head. This is basically archaic Greek sculpture, and you know, you can see where Brancusi, where Noguchi drew that inspiration. They would have been exposed to all of this. And when Brancusi came, when Noguchi came back, there was a quite an art scene, and he knew Arshil Gorky very well. Arshil Gorky was one of the early abstractionists, and they had a very strong friendship. I think there's some things about abandonment that they shared in common. Basically, Gorky's mother, he saw his mother murdered in you know, when he was back in Armenia, when they were doing the pogroms over there. He, you know, escaped to America with his family, but the scars were there. And the business of organic shapes, of, let's see, I want to do a zoom in on this so that we can look at some of this. So these organic shapes, the play of the dimensional things that are going on in here, and all that. This is the stuff that Noguchi and Gorky, and at that time somebody like de Kooning and many of the early abstractionists were playing around with, using it as reference material and all that. It's very much in the surrealist vein. There was an element of automatic writing in all of this, which is kind of like allowing things to emerge as you paint, and going with it and playing around with dimensionality and things like that.
Larry, we have a question.
Yes.
That somebody would like to know, what is organic shape?
Okay, organic shape is if you look in nature and you look at a pod, you look at a flower, you look at the structural forms in nature, you will see organic shapes. Okay, that's basically bugs and trees and um, earth earth. If you look at even stone, that is really an organic shape. It's not um, um, crisp. It's more about there's this business of the golden mean of the Fibonacci system. This is something that I could go into, but I'm not going to go there right now. What I will say is if you look in nature and you look at natural forms, that's organic shapes. Okay.
I think that's clear.
Yeah.
I just want to mention that two people raised their hand.
Yes.
Don't raise your hand. Please put your question in the chat function, which you find in the menu, either on the bottom or at the top of your screen, and type in your question. And it works that way. This way, I don't duplicate questions. And there's some questions I always save for the end. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Joan. Okay, so here are two pieces from the early 40s. And basically you can see that there's sort of a strange bird. There's sort of a this is where the surrealism comes into it. This is kind of I didn't pick out any high surrealist pieces, but if you look at somebody like Salvador Dali and look at his landscapes and look at the melting watch and all these sorts of things, that's the kind of dreamlike world that we're going into here. And this is strange bird installed in the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens, and it was the original was not bronze. That was it might have been wood. I can't remember, but this piece is cast in bronze and installed in the Japanese garden at the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens.
Larry, we have another question.
Sure.
The strange bird shape and the name both remind me of Paul Klee. Did Noguchi have any relationship with Klee?
Well, in that the surrealist notions that Paul Klee was playing around with, the dreamlike images, yes, there's certainly a relationship there. And Noguchi knew what was going on in the art world. He would have been, familiar with Klee's work. Yes. I'm not certain what shows came to America, but Noguchi got around. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the next thing that we're going to play around with. Basically, I could spend a whole talk on his relationship with Martha Graham and his relationship with set design and dance. I'm not going to do that, but I could. He did over 20 pieces with Martha Graham. This piece with the wires coming out, the serpent and spider dress. Imagine this thing illuminated with stage lighting and things like that. These wires all move when she moved and things like that. So they would shimmer and sparkle in the stage lighting. It's also this kind of surrealist landscape that he's creating with these sculptures. She loved and was very inspired by. So these are really collaborative pieces. They work together well for 5, maybe 10 years. He also worked with other dancers like Merce Cunningham. There's other dance companies that he worked with. So he did many set designs. He really loved that aspect of moving from one medium to another and the stimulation of that. And now we're moving on to another really important aspect of this guy. So Buckminster Fuller, who was this amazing character, he was basically the internet before there was an internet. They really worked together. They shared a conviction that art and science and design can merge together for the betterment of mankind. Um, uh, on the right is a telegram that Buckminster Fuller, Bucky, sent to Noguchi when Noguchi was down in Mexico working on some projects, and it is the explanation of the theory of relativity in 239 words. Quite a scintillating relationship that these guys had. They really loved each other. They worked together. They had a very strong friendship for over 20 years. And
Larry?
this, yes.
Oh, was he involved in Black Mountain College?
Not that I know of, actually. That doesn't mean he wasn't, but I don't know it. So I can't say yes. So Buckminster Fuller was this guy who had this vision of transforming how we live, housing, transportation, mapping, engineering, construction systems. Basically, many of the things that we live with today and take for granted, cybernetics was something that he was really big on. So what the hell was cybernetics? Basically, computer stuff. The Whole Earth catalog came out of Buckminster Fuller. Remember the Whole Earth catalog? It was really the internet before there was the internet. On the right is the Dymaxion. This is a car that Bucky engineered and Noguchi designed. And this thing got, 36 miles to the gallon. It was an 8-cylinder car that got 36 miles to the gallon. For a number of practical reasons, it didn't go into mass production. Basically, it was made out of aluminum. It had a racing cage inside it to protect the drivers, but it was so light that if you took it out and it was very windy, it was kind of hard to steer. You really had to know what you were doing. So, but many of his ideas have come to fruition in a number of different ways, and Noguchi was very inspired by him. Okay, now we'll transgress into the personal regions of Isamu Noguchi. He was married for a period of time, for basically 4 years, to a very beautiful international Japanese actress, Yoshiko, and he lived in a house in the country, but she was involved in theater, in films and things like that. So she would go into the city and do that and come back. They had a house that her uncle gave to her or to them, and he built. It was next to a hill, and he built a roof from the house over to the hill and dug out inside there, and there was clay inside there. So he used that clay to create, there's a clay piece on the right, which was part of the work that he did during those 4 years. And he would dig that clay out. He actually created a kiln inside there by digging out into the hill and digging up through the hill to create a chimney. And basically he fired his clay pieces that he used the clay from that hill to create. And during that time, he was basically kind of trying to live a very traditional Japanese life. He was very controlling and very focused. And that marriage didn't last too long because she was an independent woman. Even though she was Japanese, she was not having him, his stuff. Now, that being said, Noguchi had a number of different romances throughout his life. He had many girlfriends. I believe he was married again, but I'm not 100% certain about that. It got a little smoky when I was trying to come up with the bio stuff. But I know that he had many girlfriends that included a dancer named Ruth Page. He had an affair with Anais Nin. He basically had a fairly long-running relationship with a socialite and art agent, Priscilla Morgan, and that went over for well over 30 years. So he got around. Let's put it that way. Though all that being said, there was always a sense of loss and his double nationality, his double upbringing. There was always a question of, where is my home?
Did Noguchi have any children?
No children out of any of those affairs or marriage. So he actually maintained a studio in Japan and the studio in America throughout his mature life, and worked back and forth between the two. Often doing a lot of his stonework in Japan. And now we move on to this. So the idea of design in the Japanese tradition, there's really no borderline between high art and craft in Japan. They don't think of it that way. So on the left is a George Nakashima coffee table, which they're beautiful pieces. And if you're not familiar with Nakashima's pieces, they're really incredible. These slabs of wood that he created these wonderful pieces out of, and these they're just fabulous pieces. And this Herman Miller coffee table that Noguchi created is still being made at this point, and people are still buying it. So let's see. So he didn't see high and low art. It was not how he approached these things. Though people did kind of, at that time, kind of poo-poo the idea that a fine artist would be making furniture. And again, there's the Akira lamps, which are really beautiful. These they're these gorgeous things. And he had all these different models for them, and they still sell them. They sell them at the museum, and they sell them, online. You can still find them. Okay, and then we're back into the galleries.
Larry, you froze. Did it freeze on anybody else's computer? Could you, please don't raise your hand. Please write it in the text. Oh, so let me call him and see what happened. And he probably does not know that it froze.
Sorry about that.
There you go. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Let me get this over.
Okay, I was worried. Glad to see you back.
Okay. All right. And going back here. Share screen. Oh, let's see. Okay, hold on a second. Let me see what I can do here.
I've gone to many of these webinars, and you can't imagine how many technical issues occur.
There we go.
Okay, there you go.
We're back. Yes. Hi, everybody. So this is the garden outside the museum, out in the back of the museum, and you know, you can see the egg shapes, that there's texture in these guys. Let me see if I can do a close up on it. Zoom in. Yeah, okay. So you can see the texture on these stones. You know, this is all stuff that he did to these stones. And this piece up here, I believe, is it's an abstracted Indian dancer. I believe that was the name of that piece. Okay. Now, he did many gardens around the world, and we're going to be getting to some of those. So this is, again, inside the museum, and you know, the things that he did with these stones, you know, basically, you know, finding these different striations within the stone and opening that up. And he didn't paint that. That's actually part of what's inside the stone when you polish it down. And let me see, I'm going to do, nope, back. This. Okay, I want to go in and zoom in on a couple of these pieces, so you can see the you know, the chiselings and the markings and the scratching and the scraping, the kind of primitive, archaic, you know. He used to talk about, you know, a lot of the anger coming out in how he created these things. And on the right is a slide that he created in a park down in Florida. And he was very much into this playfulness, this aspect of, he designed a lot of things that didn't get executed, but he was very much into the idea of doing playgrounds. And if you look at playgrounds nowadays, you see all these really strange contraptions that kids can get into and play around with. a lot of that stuff comes out of Noguchi. This is really somebody who was very influential. And this is a park in California, in Costa Mesa, California, and you can see this sky view of the finished piece, and then on the left you see what it's like to be inside it. And it's deceptive right now to look at the one on the right. The scale of this is very large. That pyramid structure that we see in the foreground, those things are probably about, the squares in that grid are probably 10 by 10 feet. So this is pretty big. And again, I've never been in this, but this is still there as far as I know. The Chase Sunken Garden, and on the right is a close-up. Again, the play between these very loose shaped stones, this organic play, and then the very geometric forms of the concentric circles with the mosaic in the floor of the thing, and then you have the mediums, the fountains coming out, the play of water over stone. That whole business is something which again and again comes up in his work. The play of the circle against the crisp line. And his fascination with science. Again, basically these geometric forms, the idea of mathematics as a medium for art, as a structure that could also play as aesthetic. Sky viewing sculpture. And in looking at this thing, there's all this multi-dimensionality that's happening. If you look at it, there's the figure ground stuff that's happening inside it. So the black circle starts to, go in, and the curve of the light coming towards us on the inside is like, it's doing all these crazy things, flipping back and forth. And of course, I think the red cube is something that many of us have seen in the middle of Midtown. Okay. This piece, this is a drawing for the model for his last big project. Now, throughout his life, he really wanted to do large-scale pieces. He had proposed a piece at one point that never got done, that was an anthropomorphic head that would be a mile across, that would be able to be seen from outer space. And his idea was that if mankind annihilated itself through an atomic cataclysm, someday a spacecraft that landed on the moon, because they couldn't go close to the Earth because we were still radioactive, would see that there was a form of life on Earth that was sentient. That was his idea. Hey, it never got done, but this one did. This is a piece, a park that was created in Japan, and this is the model for it. It is enormous, and this is like bringing together a lifetime of ideas about earthworks and about the play between different textures and different elements in nature, water and plants and earth and stone. So I'm going to move on to show you what it looks like. This is the aerial view of this monumental piece, this park. I think my madness in wanting to make gardens and so forth lies in this usefulness, the need to feel that there is some place on earth which an artist can affect. One day in the winter, I had a vision. I saw the earth as a sculpture. I got the feeling that sculpture of the future might be on the earth.
Larry,
Yes.
somebody asked about that garden that we just saw. Did he ever get to that garden? Well, he must.
Oh, yes. He helped create this garden.
Yeah.
He was there. He worked it. It was finished in 1988, which was the year he died.
Oh.
Yes, he was there working the soil. Today, under the influence of science, the concepts of time and space have come to occupy an important place in the world. Perhaps my interest in them has always been at the root of my search for true sculpture.
Someone has a comment about that mountain. The mountain reminds me of James Turrell's Rodin Crater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a number of earthworks that have been done that, you know, basically there are parallels there. But the diversity of the pieces that he put together here are really remarkable. You know, this fountain is just incredible. Everything is sculpture. Any material, any idea without hindrance, born in space, I consider sculpture.
Someone said it looked like an eye.
Mm. So this piece, you know, it's kind of an homage to Bucky and the geodesic dome. There is that element in it. Actually, the older it is, the more archaic and primitive, the better I like it. I don't know why, but perhaps it's simply because the repeated distillation of art brings you back to the primordial.
Larry, where was that piece?
This is all in that park in Japan.
Oh, I see.
This is all of the park. These are elements of that park that I showed you. So this is a playground. This is a place for children to come and play. These are you know, things you can climb around on and walk through and be in. I'd love to go there. Okay, and this is a slide. You climb up inside this thing and slide down through these slots. Like I said, he was always playful, as serious as he was, and as precise as he was. For me, playgrounds are a way of creating the world. It's a way of creating an ideal world on a smaller scale. It's a topography I'm interested in, land in which one can run around 3 feet high. So there's that aspect of wonder and awe in all of this.
Larry, do you know where in Japan it is?
No, I don't.
Someone mentioned that the mountain reminds me of an area in Storm King. I guess that's what she means.
Yes, well, you know, basically, Maya Lin looked at this fellow. This was created before she did a number of her things, and you know, this also is Mesoamerica. I mean, basically the tombs in the pyramids in Mexico. Okay. And we're coming to a close with this wonderful late stone piece that is in the museum out in Long Island. There are some really great YouTube videos. Herrera's biography. She wrote this book called Listening to Stone, and there's a talk on YouTube by her, which is well worth listening to. There's also more about the dance pieces. They did a whole thing at the Library of Congress. I guess it was in 2016. I'm not sure when it was, but there's a YouTube on that, and there's also this Denkin Hart is one of the curators from the Noguchi Museum that went down to the Smithsonian, and they had a big show of Noguchi's work there, and he did a talk on it. The combination of his talk and Herrera's talk give you a really good picture of this guy's work, and I hope I have whetted your appetites. Now, the museum is open, you know, and I can't imagine that it gets overcrowded. So it's still, even under the circumstances that we're in, maybe safe to go there. I don't know. I mean, I didn't do it, but I would love to. So this is our story. Next week we're going to go out to Long Island again, and William Merritt Chase is going to be our next visit. So we're going to a more traditional route, but wonderful light-filled stuff. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all. Thank you, Larry. And thank you all.
You're
I
welcome.
hope to see you. I hope to see everybody at the programs that we have here at the library.